Okay, by now you should have a good idea of what it means to complete the square. So you're welcome to go ahead and give this one a try. Maybe stop the video and try it on your own. And then when you've done it, you can start the video again. I'm going to just keep going with it for now. First of all, I'm going to take out my coefficient from my first two terms. And then I'm going to halve my coefficient of x. And I'm going to square it. I'm going to add 1 and subtract 1. And then I'm going to look at the first three terms here, and that's going to become my perfect square. So I'm going to be left with x plus 1 squared, and then I'm going to have minus 1 minus 11. Okay, and then if I multiply my 4 into the big brackets, I'm going to be left with 4x plus 1 squared minus 4 minus 11, which becomes 4x plus 1 squared minus 15. I hope all of you got that right. So what I want to do now is just talk about why we want to complete the square. So there's a couple of reasons why. And the first reason is because this helps us to know where the vertex or the turning point of the quadratic is. So if I look at the quadratic in this format, it's very difficult to know where the turning point is. But as soon as I look at it in this format, here we're going to work with function transformations. You might have done a couple of these initially, but we will look at it more in functions. But for now, if we just draw a quadratic that is y is equal to x squared, it looks something like that. And then each of these extra numbers that we add is a specific transformation. So this quadratic has been shifted 1 unit to the left. That comes from the plus 1. And then it has been shifted 15 units down. So that goes quite far down. So our vertex over here is going to be minus 1 and minus 15. Okay, and then this one has also been stretched by a scale factor of 4, and that's what we get from the 4 in front of our the bracket where it's incomplete square form. Okay, so our first reason for completing the square is it helps us to sketch. So why are we doing this? It helps us to sketch the quadratic in a much easier way than if we were just looking at the original format. Okay, another reason is because it gives us the turning point. Another word for that is the vertex. Or you could also get from this the minimum value, the maximum value, or the range of the quadratic. So in this case, because our 4 is a positive value, we know that our quadratic is faced upwards. If it was a negative value, it would be faced downwards. So we have a minimum value, and our minimum value is going to be 15. So we're looking along the y-axis. Our lowest value there is negative 15. Okay, and in other words, that means for our range, our y is greater than or equal to 15. Okay, so completed square form helps us sketch, and it helps us to see the vertex or the turning point. If you look at the vertex, what we do is we take what's inside the bracket, x plus 1, and we make that equal to 0. So basically, we can see that we're using the opposite sign for our x value. So our vertex is minus 1, and then we use the same sign that we have over here, minus 15. That gives us the vertex of this quadratic. Okay, so those are two reasons. Another reason is because we can solve the quadratic. So in other words, we can find the roots. Okay, there are different ways of doing this. We can use the quadratic formula, or if possible, we can factorize. But let me just show you how we would do it from completed square form. Okay, so I've just rewritten my quadratic in completed square form, and I'm going to make it equal to 0 because then we're going to be able to find the x-intercepts. And I'm just going to take my 15 to the other side. I'm going to divide through by 4 on both sides. Now I'm going to root both sides, or square root both sides. And if I do that, I have to say plus or minus the one side. Plus or minus root of 15 over 4. And then I'm also going to take my negative 1, well, my 1 to the outside, so it becomes negative 1. And I'm just going to say root 15 over 2. So here you can look at you can find the decimals for these if you'd like to. It's root 15 over 2, or x is equal to minus 1 minus root 15 over 2. So those are my two roots of my quadratic, and you can go plot these. I'm not 100% sure where they should lie, but you can find these in decimal format. And so that's one way of solving for the roots of a quadratic when it's in completed square form. That's what we do. So we don't multiply the bracket out again, but instead we just root both sides. That's how we get rid of that squared bracket. Okay, and then I think those are the reasons why we would do it. It helps us to solve it. There is another reason why. Later on, when we are looking for the inverse graph, you first need to get the quadratic in completed square form. So just make a mental note of that for now, but when we reach that later, you will understand why that is important. Okay, then the final thing that I want to show you on this video is sometimes you are asked to put the quadratic into the form of ax plus b squared plus c. Okay, so what's important here, don't worry about whether it's a and b's or p's and q's. What's important here is that the coefficient is now inside the bracket, and what we've done over here is our coefficient is outside the bracket. Okay, so if you need to do it in this form, first of all, you first get it into the form that we know, so with your coefficient on the outside, and then what we're going to do is we're going to multiply our coefficient in, but because of the square over here, we first have to root our coefficient. So this is going to be root of 4x plus root of 4, and we square them both, and if I just simplify that, I'm going to get 2x plus 2 squared minus 15. Okay, so this is just a format, and it's very important. If we're bringing in our 4, we have to basically do the opposite of squaring it, which is rooting it. Okay, and what I want to show you here is we cannot directly read off the turning point of this function. So previously it was easy to see the turning point over here. We just use the opposite sign, so minus 1. Here, the turning point, we can't read it off directly, but what you can still do is make the bracket equal to 0, and then we're going to find our the same point that we had earlier as minus 1 and minus 15. So that's just important to note how to do those differently. Okay, so with what we've covered, that's all you need to know about completing the square. Do make a note of these reasons why we do it. It's going to be very helpful when it comes to solving papers later.